I had to think long and hard about whether or not to even do this Sunday address, mainly because this news item in particular lends itself oh too easily to the gender warring thing, which is something that I don't allow around here. And the reason that gender warring is a bad idea when it comes to black people is because look at who it is who eggs black people on the most for this mess. You got the feminists on the one hand who tell black women they need to go to war with black men. Black men are oppressing them when black men don't have the power or the desire to oppress black women. And more recently, we've had these so-called men's rights advocates who have been telling black men, the black woman's done you wrong, etc., etc. But of course, interestingly enough, whenever black men are killed, particularly by the police, these men's rights activists are nowhere to be seen. Black people as a group need to get it through our heads that when it comes to the evils and the harms and the abuses that we suffer in this society, it has absolutely nothing to do with our gender and everything to do with our race. Now, whenever I see someone running around talking that feminist nonsense or running around repeating MRA talking points, that's a problem. A lot of these individuals, especially in the MRA movement, a lot of these guys are basically card-carrying right-wing racists. They try to talk a sensitive game about men's issues, especially when it comes to the courtroom, which is going to matter to black men, but here's something that needs to be remembered. When you take a look at how it is black men are treated in the courts and how it is that white men are treated in the courts, when you look at who it is who are the judges who preside over these cases, does that have anything to do with gender or everything to do with race? Now, having laid that foundation, I'm going to dare to broach this subject. A lot of black men say that we need more black men in these prosecutors' offices. I agree, but I think that the quality of the black men who are in these prosecutors' offices matters a hell of a lot more than the quantity of them. Now, it needs to be understood that these racist DAs, if they have to put a black person in their office, they don't want any black people there at all. But if they have to have one, then as far as they're concerned, well, we'll have a black woman as our assistant prosecutor, and that's because when you look at Kamala Harris, when you look at a number of these prosecutors like Letitia James, you see that they're already on the take, they're already on the team, and it ain't Team Black Empowerment. But even when these people have no prosecutorial background, they'll still break bad. Look at Ketanji Brown or Judge Tammy the Mammy, who was hugging Amber Geiger after she got convicted. Occasionally, you'll have some people in the comments section who'll say some gender-warring nonsense like, well, a black man wouldn't do anything like that. Remember, it was that fool Kenneth Thompson who was the DA in Brooklyn, and he was the one who thoroughly ignored the law just so he could get Peter Liang off the hook for murder. Now, at this point, Kenneth Thompson is dead, so whatever he got paid to throw that case, he won't be able to spend it. I also told you a few days ago about how it was a so-called black special prosecutor and black judge who the white supremacists used out in Virginia to protect that racist white Latino cop from going to prison for assaulting that black Army lieutenant. By the way, where were all of those men's rights activists? I'm talking about the white ones who freely traffic in right-wing talking points. The reason you never hear me talking any of their gibberish is because I actually listen to a lot of what people say, not just one or two talking points. I try to take in as much of what the person actually says as possible so I can have as full a picture of them as possible. And when I looked at those men's rights activists, we're talking about years and years ago, I couldn't help but notice that these guys, whenever they are asked about other subjects aside from gender, they talk just like Tucker Carlson. These guys are no different than any other garden variety white supremacist. So for those of you who I see who from time to time use talking points that smell like that MRA stuff, you might want to be mindful of the kind of dogs that you've been laying down with. But my point is that we have no friends, and we can't afford simplistic thinking on these issues. To blindly say that, well, we just need more black people in office, that's continuing the disastrous black faces in high places nonsense that started in the 60s. You would have thought by now that some of us would have gotten the memo that a black face in a high place does you no good if they have a white supremacist mind. I don't know how else to say it. Yes, you see far more black women in these prosecutors' offices, but that's incidental because of how these DAs hire, which is based on their preference. They prefer to use a black woman to do their dirty work and act as their melanated shield to hide behind, but if they run out of pliable black female turncoats, then they'll go ahead and hire some black male bootlicks instead. White supremacy is sophisticated. A lot of simpletons don't like to admit that, but how else do you explain a system that has endured this long and has been adaptive to this degree? Now that brings us to the subject of this evening's Sunday address. There's a man who was an assistant DA in Houston and also a chef who posted videos on TikTok, Instagram, wherever. His name is Waymond Wesley. He's been forced to resign after he sparked outrage for a history of negative tweets he had posted years back in which he was trolling dark-skinned black women in particular. Now, this is someone who joined the Houston DA's office just 2 years ago, and he made these Twitter tweets several years before that. By the way, before I go any farther, I should mention TikTok is owned by China, and they control the algorithms that decide what TikTok videos users see. And what a surprise that they help guys like this get a following. It's almost as if the anti-black racism shown by white corporations like Facebook and Google, that includes YouTube, is also the same anti-black racism that we get from places like China. Anti-black racism is global. Now, this Waymond Wesley fellow ran afoul of the black females online who were upset about this guy, and they got really mad because the DA out there tried to stand by him. She wasn't going to fire him, at least not at first. But eventually he decided to resign. Whether he jumped or got pushed is not the point. Now, we could have an hours-long, drawn-out conversation about colorism, and it would be totally valid. And no matter what this Waymond Wesley guy may be claiming now, he certainly has an issue. Hell, forget issue. At this point, he has subscriptions. And his trying to blame alcohol and all the rest of it for his behavior, that may be true, but it's also irrelevant. Words mean things. And to post a picture with the caption, "She's too black," that certainly says something to me. He didn't write that she was too dark-skinned. He said she was too black. And no, I'm not reaching, and no, I'm not reading too much into it. Would this guy classify himself as something other than black? Even if this guy was trying to be some half-brained edgelord and putting out crap posts all over the internet, that doesn't excuse this. Did I mention, by the way, that he also moonlights as a chef on Instagram or TikTok? So he wanted to be internet famous. Look, there's a lot of ratchet heifers on the internet. I know I've dealt with the chicken heads for 15 years, but at no point did I or would I ever trash black women based on skin tone. And I have to be honest here. My own personal preference is for dark-skinned black women with natural hair, please. By the way, on a side note, I used to not be big on cornrows at all, mainly because I felt that from a stylistic point that they were overdone, but I think it was actually subconsciously that I saw them on a lot of these bootlick female singers, so it kind of got a negative connotation in my mind. Though in the last 5 to 6 years or so, I've kind of warmed to the idea, if you will. But the reason why I bring this up is, as Dr. Joseph Ben-Jochannan put it, there is a standard. Now, before anyone goes getting offended, hear me out. As the black community, we have had a huge problem with black folks who absolutely worship the paper bag test and who are obsessed with anything that's a lighter shade of brown. That's the way of madness, because it's never just about the skin tone in this society. It's always about the social status, which is linked to the color of your skin. We see it heavy in the islands and in Latin America, and we see it most pointedly in the United States. Now, just for the record, the lighter-skinned black set have the paper bag test, and the darker-skinned black set have the chocolate bar test. Anything lighter than a chocolate bar. And if your skin tone fails the Hershey test, that's fine. None of us had control over the circumstances of our birth. But once you're born, you don't go trashing people who look like your father or your grandmother. No shade to the lighter-skinned sisters out there. See what I did? From Lena Horne to the present, there's been a lot of lighter-skinned black women who have been 10 toes in black empowerment, solid as a rock. And it wasn't because they couldn't get a white man, it was because they knew where it's at and what it's got to be. I don't want this to devolve into a discussion about who's black enough. Let me be clear. If I had no option but to choose between a dark-skinned black woman who had the mentality of Diamond and Silk or Oprah Winfrey, or to choose a light-skinned black woman who had the mindset of Coretta Scott King, that's not even a choice. I haven't said this in a while, but I'm saying it now. Having a requisite amount of melanin is merely the beginning of being black, not the end-all and be-all. There's a whole lot of rules and regulations that go along with it. If dark skin was the only qualification, then I would have to accept the behavior of Clarence Thomas, David Clark, or Kamau Bell. By the way, all of them are married to white women and have done nothing but attack black men full time. But even if my mind was thoroughly colonized and warped by the white media so as to not want a woman whose skin tone is the same as mine, I would still have enough love for myself and common sense not to attack them regardless. When I first started posting online, my first viral video was RIP Black America. After I posted that, the totality of the Hoodrat collective tried to come for me. It was like mosquitoes trying to take down an aircraft carrier. You could tell who got hit when I threw that particular brick, because it was light-skinned, dark-skinned, in-between skinned, 18 to 80, dumb, crippled, and crazy, mostly crazy. I mean, it was all the hood rats across the board. Their attacks on me were as intellectually empty as they were useless. And I know that for some folks, they get a childish thrill out of winding people up by posting something really shocking or intentionally offensive and harmful towards somebody, but that's hood rat behavior. And it doesn't get any better just because a man does it. In fact, that makes it worse. The reason women are supposed to follow men's lead is because women are primarily emotional. They are not nothing but emotion, but they are primarily emotional. And despite their best efforts, as often as not, their emotions will get the better of them, whether it's making a decision about what kind of car to buy or how they respond to something they didn't like on the internet. Now, that doesn't make it right or excuse it. Women may be far more emotional than men, but they're still adults, they still have reasoning skills, and are expected to exercise self-control. But my point is, a man is not supposed to react like a hood rat to things. Now, hood rats don't care what damage they do. They don't think before they act because they're incapable of thinking. That's why they're hood rats. They just want attention. And for them, if people hate them, that's fine because they'll do anything just to get people to acknowledge their existence, even if it's only for 5 minutes on the internet. And most of them don't even last that long. Crap posting on the internet isn't a long-term strategy, mainly because when you decide to go down that road, you have to top yourself. You're not giving people insightful information, you're just trying to be shocking, so that means you have to come up with something even more offensive next time, more reprehensible, more angry and vitriolic, more hurtful. But that game eventually runs out, and that's the track that this Waymond Wesley person put himself on. Because among other things, there was also the accusation that he tweeted if Black Lives Mattered to Sandra Bland, she wouldn't have taken her own life. I'm serious too. Now, I haven't found screenshots of this particular alleged Twitter tweet or this online message that people are claiming that he posted. Only thing I found is people who claim to have copied and pasted the text of the comment along with tagging his Twitter handle. I haven't been able to actually verify this, and he hasn't admitted to it, so I guess it is what it is. He lost a couple of food brand deals that he had. He's apologized profusely, and he even threw some extras on it, like saying black women are the most disrespected, unprotected, and neglected demo in America. I'm curious about something, though. Here's another question. Do you think that this Wesley character was making it a point to go after the police when he was in the DA's office? Was he making sure that black defendants got a fair shake and were not simply prosecuted just because you could put a case against somebody? Or do you think that he spent the last 2 years doing his cooking videos online and acting like a big shot because he could say, I work in the Houston DA's office? Now you already know. About the only person I can think of in the courtroom who's done black folks any good is Judge Olu Stevens. And that's pretty much it. If there are others out there, I haven't seen them. As many black people in this country who have law degrees, we should have a ton of Olu Stevens out there. Instead, we essentially have only one. And why is that? It's because most black lawyers are trying to chase ambulances like Sleaze Merritt was doing, and the other half are trying to parlay their legal career into a political career, just like Sleaze Merritt's trying to do. So you see, this story has a number of moving parts to it. The gender warring and colorism angles happen to be part of it, but the problem is that's the lowest part of it. That's the least important part. The real hell of it is, has this guy done anything for black people when he was a prosecutor? Far as I can see, not much. Well, since he likes being on camera so much, I guess after this, he can follow in the footsteps of another failed black prosecutor and try to become a NIMI-nominated producer. The lesson here is promoting yourself is not the same as promoting your people. And I know there will no doubt be a few brothers who stick up for this guy, and to them I'll say this. When you willingly allow Hoodrats to drag you into the gutter, you're in their arena. And as Mark Twain said, stupid people will drag you down to their level and then beat you with experience. My point of this morning's briefing is that there's a reason we don't have justice in the courtrooms, despite having a number of black people working in these prosecutors' offices and even as judges. White power selects compliant tools who will do their bidding. There's no justice in the courts because we don't have any of our kind in the courts. No rock-ribbed, steel-spined, fire-breathing black empowerment advocates. So no matter if they're a black woman or a black man, they're not there to make sure there's equal justice for black people. And as far as I'm concerned, that makes all of them guilty. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Brenda McPherson, Starlet Thompson, Deep Eye 904, Josh Heath, and Alice Ransom. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.